This is Kansas City Today. I'm Brian Ellison. Today is Monday, June 22nd. Coming up, Missouri's state auditor says the state is on course for financial disaster.
Again, this is a spending problem. When you grow 53% in 5 years spending as a governmental entity, that is not a sustainable path. And so I want to make sure that it's understood that I view this at least as a spending problem, not a revenue problem.
Why Scott Fitzpatrick thinks the state has no choice but to cut spending, even as it considers reducing the state income tax. But first, our weekly look at top government and politics stories on both sides of the state line. Missouri's Planned Parenthood affiliates will offer medication abortion for the first time in years after a Jackson County judge struck down many state laws that restrict the procedure late last week. Sarah Fenton reports on the ruling by Judge Jerry Jung.
State voters approved Amendment 3 in 2024, which put the right to an abortion in the Missouri Constitution. The state's Planned Parenthood affiliates soon sued to strike down dozens of restrictions. Jung ruled statutes, including a 72-hour waiting period, facilities licensing requirements, and a rule that requires tissue to be sent to a lab after an abortion, are now unlawful under the new amendment. Planned Parenthood has resumed some abortions since Amendment 3, but has said the rules have made prescribing medication abortion impossible. Missouri officials argued during a 10-day bench trial earlier this year that such laws were necessary to ensure safety. Attorney General Catherine Hanaway says she'll fight to appeal the decisions to the state's Supreme Court.
4 of the 7 Republicans vying for Kansas governor battled last week over the incentive package used to lure the Kansas City Chiefs across the border from Missouri. In a forum hosted by a Wichita radio station, former Johnson County Commissioner Charlotte O'Hara criticized shelling out tax incentives for the NFL team while property taxes are rising for individuals. Johnson County businessman Philip Sarnecki also was critical, suggesting lawmakers were too swayed by lobbyists and by the money in politics. But the elected officials in the forum, Senate President Ty Masterson and Secretary of State Scott Schwab, defended the deal. Masterson said the deal would inspire billions in private investment and create thousands of jobs. And Schwab said he celebrated that the plan, quote, took something from Missouri. The Kansas Reflector reports that the candidates also traded jabs on economic development, data centers, and how best to operate K-12 schools in the state. Not included in the forum were 3 other candidates, Nick Reinecker, Stacey Rogers, and State Insurance Commissioner Vicki Schmidt. This August, Missouri voters will consider starting a process that could cut state income tax to 0 over 5 years. That tax funds about a third of the state's total budget. Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe has made the plan on the ballot in August as Amendment 5 a top priority. He says much of the lost revenue can be made up in spending cuts, including cuts to public education.
We have a group working on rewriting the school funding formula so that we have a process where schools who excel and do great things for kids and have kids graduate that have a fighting chance in whatever career they want to go on to can be rewarded, and underperforming schools, quite frankly, will try to get an opportunity to help the chance to improve.
Kehoe says the state was going to have to downsize anyway, as the flood of COVID-related federal stimulus money has run dry. We'll have more about the Missouri budget when Kansas City Today returns in a moment. Everyone seems to agree, and they said so during the recent session of the General Assembly, that Missouri is nearing a fiscal cliff. Budget surpluses during the years of pandemic-related federal funding had allowed the state to maintain a substantial reserve, but now it's dwindling. How serious that problem is and what the state's leaders should be doing about it may be up for debate, but a new report from the official state watchdog, Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick, portrays the situation in the most dire terms. I spoke with the Republican Fitzpatrick last week on Up to Date and asked him to start by giving us the gist of his report.
Well, what we found is that we're in kind of the post-COVID hangover, budget-wise, that many states are going to be going through. Missouri is one of, obviously, every state that received a lot of money from the federal government during the pandemic. We also had a significant increase in state tax receipts that went along with that. And those things combined led to an increase in spending from the General Revenue Fund over a period of 5 years of like 53%. which is more than double the rate of inflation. CPI was up about 25% during that same time frame. And so we've had a long run of government growing significantly faster than the rest of the economy, or at least faster than inflation. And you can't do that forever. So that's kind of the message we're putting out there. The general revenue fund is being spent from at a deficit, meaning we built up a big balance in the early years of COVID. And over the last few years, we've been spending more than we've been collecting and burning that balance down. So the general revenue fund balance, which is the primary fund that we fund state government with, has gone from a high watermark of about $5.8 billion to being projected to be at about $600 million at the end of this coming fiscal year, which will end about a year from now.
Which sounds like a lot of money, but in fact is not very much when you start taking away from it.
Well, so just to give you some context, I mean, we're going to spend about $2 billion more this year than we collect. So if you end the year next year with $600 million and a $2 billion deficit, that only gets you about a third of the way into the year before you run out of money. And so that's kind of the warning that we're putting out there, is that the state is on track to run out of money in about 16 to 18 months if we don't start cutting spending and getting expenses more in line with the revenue, because we are running out of money in the general revenue fund. We can't do this forever.
Now, in fairness, the state has been spending money more or less the way it has been spending it in the past year or two for quite a long time, right? I mean, even back to the days when you were the chair of the House Budget Committee, the spending would sort of start at one place with the governor's proposed budget. Then there would be things added in the House, and there'd be things added in the Senate. This is kind of a pattern that's been going on for a while, right?
Not to this extent. Now, when I was the budget chairman, my first year as budget chair, I think I might be the only person in history to do it without a federal government bailout, reduced general revenue fund appropriations from the year that was before my chairmanship to the year I was the chairman. If you go look at the numbers, I think I cut about $150 or $60 million that first year from the general revenue fund. But we were dealing with much different times, and the general revenue fund balance has historically been in that $500 to $600 million range at the end of the year. So $5.8 billion is an unprecedented amount of money for the state to be holding on to. Never during the time that I was in the legislature did we have a budget deficit that was, we didn't have a budget deficit at all, because we didn't have money in the bank to fund one. And so the budget was always, we were spending about what we were collecting. And we got only recently and very temporarily into the situation where we had more money than we needed for a period of time. And so this is a phenomenon that has been going on for a few years. It certainly predates Governor Kehoe's time in office. So he inherited this, and unfortunately, it's going to be his problem to have to fix. But the other thing is, again, this is a spending problem. When you grow 53% in 5 years spending as a governmental entity, that is not a sustainable path. And so I want to make sure that it's understood that I view this at least as a spending problem, not a revenue problem. We've grown revenue significantly. We just are spending more than we've grown.
Revenue has grown from a variety of sources, but there also have been pretty concerted and consistent efforts to reduce taxes, to reduce the capital gains taxes in Missouri, and to reduce now, through Amendment 5, potentially the state income tax. Couldn't this both be a spending problem and a revenue problem? I mean, why is it that there's only one side of the ledger that can help address this catastrophe you're talking about?
If we were looking at a situation where inflation was 25% over that 5-year period and spending had only grown at the rate of inflation at 25%, and we had a $2 billion deficit, then I would be more inclined to agree with you that we had a revenue problem. That's not the case. We've outpaced inflation by more than 2 to 1 on spending growth. Revenue is up 43% in that same period of time. So revenues climbed almost double inflation, and we've done that while cutting the income tax. When I got to the House in 2013, the income tax was 6%. Now it's 4.7%. So we've grown revenue substantially while cutting taxes, which to me is kind of proof that you can cut taxes and grow revenue. I mean, we've done it. We did it differently than what our friends in Kansas tried to do back in the early 2010s, where they basically they just went straight to cutting without having any triggers or any revenue growth attached to the cuts. They didn't do any replacement.
that last paragraph in your report, and you are very specific. I don't even know how common this is for auditors to include this sort of recommendation in their reports, but here's what it says. It says it is imperative that the governor and General Assembly take whatever measures necessary to proactively balance Missouri's budget, including line item vetoes and withholds to the fiscal year 2027 budget, vetoes of legislation that have significant associated costs, significant reductions to future appropriation bills, or a combination of those. You are urging the governor essentially in the next few weeks, as he considers signing the budget bills, to use his line item veto or to withhold some of that spending in some very direct ways. Have you talked to the governor specifically about this?
Oh, well, yeah, I've spoken to the governor a few times this year, just giving him my perspective and on the budget and telling him that I think that he would be strongly within his constitutional authority to withhold money from the current year budget, from the fiscal year 27 budget, which is the one that's, the fiscal year starts July 1st for that. My opinion is that doing more now means doing less later, gives you a longer runway. So we have a $1.7 billion deficit that we're projecting for this year. If we can get that down to say, half that extends our runway kind of another year with our fund balance. It gives revenue another year to catch up to expenditures a little bit. It's going to make for a softer landing. It's going to hurt a little bit now, but it's going to make for a softer landing of the more we do now. I've told the governor that. The governor has obviously decisions to make, and he has to deal with the legislature in ways that I don't have to as the auditor. So he's going to make his decisions, but I just wanted to make sure by putting that in there that everybody understood at least what I thought was necessary, and that's coming from somebody who has a lot of experience with the state budget, both as the chairman of the budget committee, the state treasurer, and now as the auditor. For me, it's to provide perspective so that when he does take action, assuming he does what I think needs to be done, which is a lot of line item vetoes and withholding from the budget, that he will have something at least to refer back to that's a public document that everybody can look at and say, okay, we understand why this had to happen.
Missouri State Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick joined me on KCUR's talk show Up to Date. By the way, I spoke the next day with Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe about Fitzpatrick's dire warnings about the state budget. Kehoe, also a Republican, said his office is scouring the budget passed by the General Assembly, looking for places to cut.
We're going through every line. There's over 3,000 lines in Missouri's budget and multiple more items in each line. So we're looking at what we think Missourians can do and we think is common sense. We're looking at, quite frankly, new programs that have been funded since 2021, and can we continue to cost to afford them?
The budget needs to be signed, with or without vetoes, by the end of June. This is Kansas City Today. I'm Brian Ellison. This episode was produced by Byron Love and KCUR Studios. It was edited by Emily Younker and Laura Ziegler. Our music comes from Blue Dot Sessions. Be sure to subscribe to the Up to Date podcast to hear more coverage of government and politics news. And of course, visit kcur.org, the home of Kansas City's NPR station. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.